You don't apply for this job because you're greedy. You apply because you're tired. Tired of being ignored. Tired of being almost good enough. Tired of sending your resume into silence and pretending it doesn't hurt. And when someone finally answers, when they say they chose you, that's when the trap begins. It started with an email that looked better than most real offers I'd seen in years. Clean formatting, a real company name, a professional tone that didn't beg or rush or flatter too much. Just enough confidence to feel legitimate. They said they had reviewed my profile carefully. They said my experience aligned perfectly with what they were building. They said they wanted to move fast. I reread the email 3 times, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted it to stay real a little longer. The first interview was video-based. Not live, but structured. Pre-recorded questions, timed responses. They explained it was to ensure fairness across candidates in different time zones. That made sense. Everything made sense. I dressed professionally anyway, even though no one would see my lower half. I spoke clearly. I smiled at the camera. I answered questions about teamwork, problem solving, conflict resolution. I talked about my values. I talked about growth. When I submitted the video, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. 2 days later, they replied. They praised my communication skills. They highlighted specific phrases I had used. They referenced moments from the video that only someone who had actually watched it could know. That detail mattered. It disarmed me completely. Then came the test assignment. Not free labor, at least not obviously. It was reasonable. A simulated task. A controlled scenario. Something that demonstrated thinking, not production. I spent hours on it anyway. Not because they demanded it, but because I wanted this to be the one. I wanted to prove to myself that I still had value. When I sent it in, I felt proud. Not hopeful, proud. Their response came faster than expected. They said I exceeded expectations. They said they rarely saw this level of clarity. They said the team was impressed. The word team did something to me. It implied belonging. It implied a future where I wasn't alone in my effort anymore. Then they sent the contract. A real document. Letterhead. Legal language. Clauses about confidentiality, termination, intellectual property. Nothing sloppy. Nothing amateur. It even included a probation period, which made it feel more real, not less. Scams promise certainty. This promise structure. I signed it slowly, carefully, as if rushing might break the spell. They welcomed me aboard. They gave me a start date. They gave me an onboarding schedule. And that's when they asked for one small thing. Just a formality. They said that before the first salary payment, their finance department needed to verify my payment method. They explained it was part of anti-fraud compliance. They explained it was required for international hires. They explained it clearly, politely, professionally. They didn't ask for money. They asked for trust. I filled out the form. Bank details. Identity confirmation. Standard things I had given many companies before. Still, I hesitated for a moment, not because something felt wrong, but because something felt important. This mattered. This was real now. A few hours later, they replied again. There was an issue. Not a big one. Just a technical mismatch. They said sometimes new hires' accounts triggered security flags in their system. It was rare, but it happened. They apologized for the inconvenience. They reassured me this was normal. Then they said something that would echo in my head for months afterward. They said, "We don't want this to delay your onboarding." They offered a solution. A temporary verification transaction. A refundable security check. A small amount, relative to the salary I was about to earn. They said it would be returned immediately. They said it was processed by a third-party compliance provider. They said they had already approved me. This was not about trust, it was about procedure. I stared at the number. It wasn't insignificant, but it wasn't impossible. And that's the danger zone, the space where logic bends under hope. I told myself real companies have stupid systems too. I told myself I had already passed too many steps for this to be fake. I told myself that walking away now would mean admitting that everything before this, the interviews, the praise, the contract, had been a lie. I didn't want to believe that. So I paid. They thanked me. They said everything was progressing smoothly. They said I would receive confirmation shortly. Instead, the next message was about equipment. They explained that due to security policies, they couldn't ship pre-configured devices internationally. They said new hires were required to purchase approved equipment locally, and that the company would reimburse the cost with a first paycheck. They sent a list. They sent links. They sent specifications so detailed it felt absurd to question them. They said this was non-negotiable, but they said it kindly. I hesitated longer this time. Something in me whispered that this was too much. But something louder reminded me how many times I had been rejected before. How many times I had been told I was almost right, but not quite. How many times I had promised myself that next time I wouldn't overthink it. I paid again, not because I was convinced, but because I was invested. At this point, leaving would mean admitting that I had been wrong, not just tricked wrong, that I had missed signs, that I had failed to protect myself. And I wasn't ready to feel that yet. After that, the tone changed slightly. Not aggressively, just colder. Messages took longer. Responses became shorter. They said the finance department was reviewing my file. They said there was a delay. They said there was one final step, a security clearance fee. This time, they didn't apologize. They framed it as my responsibility. They implied that delays reflected poorly on my professionalism. They reminded me of deadlines. They reminded me how competitive the role had been. And that's when the hope turned into something else. Fear. Fear of losing what I thought I had earned. Fear of being judged. Fear of looking foolish. I paid again, not because I believed them anymore, but because I didn't want to believe what it would mean if I didn't. The silence after that was different. Not delayed. Empty.
No confirmations. No reassurances.
No onboarding updates. Just nothing. I refreshed my inbox compulsively. I checked spam. I checked sent messages. I reread the contract, searching for something I had missed. I searched the company name again, deeper this time, past the first page of results. That's when I found it.
A forum post.
Then another. Then dozens. Different names. Different countries. Same story. The same interview structure. The same praise. The same payment requests. The same ending. I didn't cry immediately. First came numbness. Then heat. Then a sharp, humiliating clarity. They had never wanted my skills. They had never planned to hire me. They had studied me. They had mirrored professionalism because they knew I was desperate for it. They had weaponized hope. And the worst part wasn't the money. It was the way I replayed every moment in my head, hearing my own optimism turn against me. Hearing how carefully I had convinced myself. How I had defended them when doubt appeared. How I had silenced that voice inside me because it threatened something I wanted too badly. I felt small. Not poor, small. As if my need for dignity had been exposed and mocked. I didn't tell anyone at first, because explaining it meant admitting I had believed, admitting I had trusted, admitting I had wanted this more than I wanted to be safe. That's the final cruelty of these scams. They don't just take your money. They take your confidence and leave you ashamed of having had it. Weeks later, the emails were still there. The contract was still signed. The job title was still real, just not for me. And sometimes, even now, when I see a new message promising opportunity, my heart still reacts before my brain does. That's the scar, not fear. Conditioning. If a job ever asks you to pay to prove your worth, you are not being hired. You are being harvested. And the most dangerous scams don't feel fake. They feel earned, because they know exactly what you're hoping for.
When you click apply,